Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, all consumers who are listening to us, watching us, wherever you are in the global world. Once again, we are greatly honored to be with you on the Humanist TV Africa. And as usual, we once again thank the Humanist Media Africa for the opportunity they give us, their partnership, and the mission they add to improving humanity by giving us time, space, platform to talk about issues that affect humanity, and where we focus on improving the quality of life for consumers, contribute to improving business to be better, ethical, so that the consumers get safe, quality goods and services and their money worth. So once again, I would like to thank our producer, Dennis Bongole in Entebbe, and all your colleagues, wherever they are, whether they're in capitals in Africa or elsewhere, or they are in cities, municipalities, or even communities. We would like to thank you very much for the support you give us. Consumers, welcome to the month of June. The month of June is quite endowed. It has many world celebration days or commemoration days. But today, we are coming in to celebrate one of the newest world days sanctioned by the UN, the World Food Safety Day. That falls on 7th June of every year. It is all about raising awareness about food safety. And as you know, food is our foundation as humanity. Food is our health. Food is our joy, and food is everything. Food is life. Food is healthcare. So this month, we are going to celebrate in a number of series the World Food Safety Day, and we are going to focus on a number of aspects. Today, we are going to talk about aflatoxin in Uganda, how it is affecting food safety, and then we'll look at food security in general and the entire food system or the environment. But as we go to start digging in, I would like to go back to other world commemorations that we have had during this week and which are very well linked. As from a food systems approach, we have had the World Earth Day or World Environment Day. Some time back, there was Earth Day. And also there is a World Anti-Counterfeit Day. And when you look at all of these, they have a role to play with regards to food safety. Before I dig into food safety as your responsibility as consumers and as your right, I would like to just chip in a little on the World Environment Day. The World Environment Day, the theme was Beat Plastic Pollution. And you must appreciate that plastics are a menace. We consumers play a role, a very big role, in making plastics a menace because we litter, we overuse, We go in for single-use plastics, and after using them, we discard them irresponsibly. And you recall in our earlier sessions, we had talked about zero waste, where we need to reuse, recycle, repurpose, so that we have zero waste. But as this year's World Environmental Day, it was urging us to beat plastics, to beat the plastic pollution, because plastic waste is polluting our soils, it's polluting our waterways, it's polluting the food system. It harms our health, it threatens the diversity, and it worsens the climate crisis we're in. So as we deliberate some of the recommendations we are going to talk about with regards to the World Food Safety Day will align with also those that were discussed during the World Environment Day. So, fellow consumers, after being consumers, we have those that are duty bearers, the executive, the policy makers, the legislature, the judiciary, the regulators. First, as all fellow consumers, and then back into your areas of responsibility as duty bearers, businesses. We need to be responsible, we need to be ethical, we need to protect the consumers, we need to enhance and have ethical or better business that provide and sustain the One Health planet that we need. Having talked about the World Environment Day and linking it to our subject matter today, which is looking at the World Food Safety Day, and like I've said, plastic waste, plastic pollution affects food safety, because when packaging material is used with wrong recycled material, it contaminates food. But there is another aspect, the World Anti-Counterfeit Day. The World Anti-Counterfeit Day falls today, 6th June. And if you recall in our area series, we talked about food fraud. Counterfeit is not only in goods, it's not only in services. If your food is frauded, if somebody tells you that this is organic and it is not, in one way it's counterfeiting. They might label it with another organic food which is genuine, and they counterfeit the label. They counterfeit the merchandise, the product, and they tell you this is this. That is counterfeiting. They might counterfeit water that will affect food safety. And the theme for this Anti-Counterfeit Day, advancing anti-counterfeit efforts to foster innovation and consumer trust. Anything that is not safe, it endangers consumers, and consumers lose trust and confidence. And these are some of the things we are going to talk about when we unpack. So colleagues, as we are discussing this month the issues to do with counterfeit, I'll be interacting with my colleague Bernard, who will be unpacking the Aflatoxin in Uganda report, looking at policy gaps, looking at the actions, the causes. How do we come up with solutions? But that said, I would like to have a little of a curtain riser on a number of aspects as we go in to appreciate the World Food Safety Day in a number of aspects. The World Food Safety Day, that is going to be commemorated tomorrow on the 7th of June in Uganda, and I don't know what you're going to do in your countries. It will be good you share in the chat. But the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the UN World Health Organization made a proposal, and the General Assembly agreed every 7th of June of a given year, we need to celebrate, raise awareness on aspects that affect our food. And today, as in Uganda, well, like we say, we will love at each and every TV program to use Uganda as a case study, and then you localize it. But we would like to use the global and common message from the Codex Committee or Codex Alimentarius Commission. That is an agency that was formed with FAO, the World, the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization joint formed the Codex Alimentarius Commission that is looking into food safety, looking into food standards, food protocols, food guidelines, and they come in with a global picture with regards to food safety. And we would love to have a common language while we are celebrating this year's World Food Safety Day. The theme is Food Safety, Science in Action. And all the aspects I've alluded to, they can be resolved through science. But I wish to start by saying, food safety saves lives. And like I said earlier, food safety or food is everything. Food is foundation, food is healthcare. And if it is not safe, it isn't food. So food safety saves lives. It is not only the crucial component of food security, but it also plays a vital role in reducing food safety or foodborne diseases as it builds your immune system. But once you get foodborne diseases, it suppresses your immune system. Your immunity is lowered. So it is recognized that every year about 600 million consumers fall sick as a result of around about 200 different types of foodborne illnesses that are caused by many practices. Some are physical, others are biological, others are chemical occurrences. The burden of such illness falls mostly on the poor and on the young, who are the majority. The young, we have got the global world population, most of them are young. And once they fall sick, productivity also goes down. In addition, foodborne diseases illnesses are responsible for over 420,000 preventable deaths every year. So it is very key that, colleagues, we discuss food safety. And as it is said, it is everybody's responsibility. And this year, we would like to see how does science come into action to be proactive, to make sure that we do not get or we address the foodborne diseases, to address the contaminations that are physical, biological, chemical, and so forth. So the World Food Safety Day is an important way of making consumers aware of food safety issues, demonstrating how to prevent the illnesses through food safety culture practices, coming up with a quality culture in our homes, communities, businesses, schools of learning, institutions of learning, in any place where people gather and they have an opportunity to eat. We need to have quality culture, food safety culture, have a culture of quality in all the processes that enable us access food. We need to discuss how best we can collaborate, have approaches that can improve food safety across sectors and promoting solutions and ways of having our food more safe. This leads us to looking at science. Science not only in laboratories, research, but also there is indigenous knowledge, how our great parents, kinsfolk, used to save their food, used to save and preserve whatever they were using with regards to food. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow consumers, policymakers, duty bearers, businesses, it is very key that we address food safety in its entirety. We come up with aspects of how best we analyze, how best we corroborate, how best we advocate and sustain the voices of and collective actions to make sure consumers at whatever level of society receive food, safe food, whether they are in homes and whether they are in eating places, whether they are traveling, street vended foods. We need to make sure that we jointly address the aspects of food safety. And to our brothers and sisters who are celebrating Eid, we would like to thank you. May you please celebrate it with safe food and make sure that you do not get food poisoning. There are many aspects that affect food, and it gives me an opportunity with that poster to welcome Bernard Carlos Bwambale, a colleague at work and a colleague and a coordinator of the Food Safety Coalition of Uganda, to unpack the report that the Food Safety Coalition has prepared and which we launched with the Minister of Agriculture, with the National Research Organization, and members of Parliament, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in Uganda, the United Nations World Health Organization in Uganda, many other stakeholders, and members of the Food Safety Coalition. We came up with a report which was launched on the 4th at the High Breakfast meeting, which report, colleagues online, whether you are in Africa, the Americas, Europe, the Asias, you can use and localize to make sure that we have got global safe food, because with global trade, food crosses boundaries, and every mean of transport that brings the food also needs to be safe so that it doesn't contaminate the food. So the food business, please, those listening in, urge them to follow the food safety requirements in food transportation, food packaging, food dispensation, food distribution. As we are discussing today, we need to look at before farm and after fork with aspects to do with food safety. So, ladies and gentlemen, Let's put ourselves together to welcome Bernard as he unpacks for us the Uganda report on aflatoxin, which aflatoxin cuts across most of the grains, and not only grains, but it also goes in where microtoxins are found in fish, while they are found in many other products. The food producing animals get affected when they eat feed that is contaminated, and then they come into the food chain and they also affect us. So Bernard, with that long curtain riser, I'm honored once again to be back on TV with you, and I look forward to listening in and also to come back and conclude with some other views. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Henry, thank you so much.
Bernard? So I don't know, Bernard might be affected by the network as he gets back. Yeah, the little I can share about the report that he's going to unpack for us. It is all about food safety, and it will have aspects that raise, that is when we were launching the report. You will see Mr. Bernard Bwambale. If you look at on your right, he's there with me and the Minister of Agriculture while we were launching the report. So further, you'll see that the report that Bernard is going to unpack for us, which is a tool that you can use in your respective countries. The Food Safety Coalition Uganda is a knowledge hub. So we generate information. You'll find people, you might ask yourself, and what does Consent do? Consent is a member of the Food Safety Coalition. We are a number of over 20 organizations that form the coalition, and I do chair the coalition. And that's why we work very closely with Bernard to generate food safety information. So aflatoxins in Uganda is the report that was launched. It focuses on the health, economic, and it focuses on the health and economic impact policy gaps and strategic interventions for sustainable food safety. So Bernard, as you were getting back and overcoming the technical glitch, I was informing them and giving them a little bit of background on the food school and why the report, and informing them that we are a knowledge hub whose information can be used globally to safeguard consumers to have safe food for all and safe food by all. So Bernard, you can take over from there.
Okay, so thank you so much, Henry. I don't know what happened, but somehow I saw the technology going, and I said, now, what is this causing to the... but anyhow, so
It
ladies and
was
gentlemen,
science in
we are going to
action.
speak through... Yeah, I mean, yes, it was. So we're going to basically look at the concept of aflatoxins. I know that there are a lot of food safety concerns that we've been talking about during the course of our episodes, and today I really want to, in the few minutes, I want to share with us something on aflatoxins. And as the coalition, we realized that there's a lot of information kind of gap. We don't have a one-stop center where we can get information on aflatoxins. So we decided to do a thorough desk review to make sure that we gather all the different papers on aflatoxins and specifically in Uganda. And then we have all this information in one kind of one space, so that in case you want to develop materials, in case you want to read more about aflatoxins, in case you want to come up with aflatoxin related projects, you have data consolidated and in one place where you can actually easily find it. So we did this study to make sure that we look at the different perspectives on aflatoxins in Uganda, and specifically looking at what are the issues, what is the impact of aflatoxins on our health, and also on healthcare, but also exploring what would be the impact of aflatoxins on trade. A socioeconomic transformation where most of the farmers are now into the commercial farming. But what is the risk that you stand in terms of socioeconomic aspects if we don't deal with aflatoxins? So that is basically what we are going to look at. I'm just going to give you the updates and some quick insights from the report. But each one of you can be able to access the report online. We have already put it there. I think we shall also be able to share the QR code so that you can easily find it and then you can be able to dive into. Now, aflatoxins is not a new subject. We've been talking about aflatoxins for quite some time, and we had quite a number of sessions for a whole month on this series discussing the aspects of aflatoxins. Now, aflatoxins basically these are it's just a fungal kind of, I would call it a fungal infection in our food, and it comes because usually resulting from the poor handling of the food right away from the garden. And with the fungus, aspergillus flavus, which brings about the aflatoxins, it actually loves moisture, it loves water. So the moment you have dry stuff, let us say dry cereals, and then you put them in a moist area, the more you increase the moisture content of these dried cereals, the more you're likely actually to attract that fungus, and then it will go into the food and starts developing mold. So many of you must have seen that at your homes you can find bread with mold. You can find your cassava with mold. But maybe to be specific, most of the staple cereals and legumes and grains that we have in our country are all susceptible to actually aflatoxins. So people in Africa, because of our weather and our climate, it actually facilitates the growth of these molds. So it's very easy that our staple foods can be at risk of having aflatoxins if we actually don't handle our grain very, very, very well. And there are many practices, of course, that could result into the aflatoxin issues. One of them is the poor handling, as I mentioned. Let us go back to the garden. When you look at people who are cultivating maize, who are cultivating groundnuts, who are cultivating millet, sorghum, and other cereals or grain, you realize that actually they would leave the grain in the garden even when it is ready for harvest. They leave it in the garden, and with the episodes of rain that keep coming, the maize has dried in the garden, but then in the night it rains. So the moment it rains and finds the dried maize in the garden, you are just basically increasing the moisture content of the grain. And the moment the moisture content keeps on increasing, the mold, aspergillus flavus, finds an opportunity actually to grow in there. So therefore, the farmers are not supposed to dry food in the garden. Once it is ready, harvest it, take it home and clean a place and dry it there. So that is one. Number two, when it comes to post-harvest handling, how are our people handling food after the garden? You find a lot of food, let us say cassava, maize, sorghum, millet, being dried on tarmac roads, being dried on bare grounds, being dried on rusted iron sheets, being dried in very weird places. All of those actually increase the risk of contamination of the grains. So it means that if you're going to handle food post harvest, you need to make sure that the food, first of all, is not dried on bare ground, it is not dried on tarmac roads, it's not dried on rusted iron sheets, it's not dried in dirty places. Because the moment you don't prevent that, the mold will actually find an opportunity to come in there. We have also seen people who don't have enough storage spaces, and so they end up uh, putting food in sacks, and then they leave the sacks outside, and then in the night the rain comes and hits the bags, and at the end of the day we see that the bags are actually getting the water enters into the bags, and the bags are having grain, and the grain captures the water, and then the aflatoxin starts developing. So you see that the post-harvest handling issues can become a challenge. When you look at the transporters, you look at the traders, you look at people who are dealing with food, how are we keeping this food in our stores? how are we maintaining the hygiene of the place where we are keeping the food? All of those can contribute to the risk of contamination of the food. Now, why is this a problem? And why are we talking about aflatoxins? I want you to note from this conversation, using a case of Uganda, we know that 75% of the grains in our country are actually contaminated with aflatoxins. Now, that is a sad story, and that is the sad reality. We're talking about 75% of the grains that we have in this country having aflatoxins actually being contaminated. You can just see why we worry about aflatoxins. This report actually summarizes all this, but we realize that 75% of grain in Uganda are actually contaminated with aflatoxins. And the issue is that the concentration of the aflatoxins in our grain is really way beyond what we should have. So the standard talks about 10 parts per billion, but our grain goes even beyond 20 parts per billion. While we are launching this report, we called on the traders who are trading in maize, and one of their representatives came to share with us their perspective on aflatoxins. And he was telling us that they got a very good market in Nairobi where they would be selling their grain at a higher cost than what we are buying in Uganda. And so they make a deal with the Grain Millers Association of Kenya. And indeed, the market was very available. But guess what? The condition was you'll send us the maize, but the maize must be having less than 8 parts per billion contaminants, meaning that the aflatoxin content in the maize that is going to be accepted for that market should be less than 10 parts per billion, at least 8. They would take on 8 and below. So they wouldn't take on anything above 10 contamination levels. And so, of course, the Ugandan guys were like, yeah, I mean, we have clean maize and all this. So now the Kenyan market, they required that before the consignment is sent to Kenya, the consignment was supposed to first be tested for aflatoxins just a few months ago. Now, the Traders Association of Uganda, they collected maize from the farmers, from the stores, from wherever they were collecting the maize, and they were able to make up 96 metric tons. 96 metric tons. Now, when they collected 96 metric tons, of course, the Kenyan market had already set a standard. They want less than 8 parts per billion as the maximum aflatoxin content in the grain. And so they came and took up samples. They went to test the samples. And the gentleman who is the chairperson of that Traders Association was telling us that when they tested the maize for Uganda, which he himself had actually collected and given to those guys, it came out that actually the best sample was at 30 parts per billion. 30. Remember, the threshold was 8. Ours was up to 30, and that is the best. So, meaning that the other samples were even running beyond 30 parts per billion. What that means is that the level of contamination in the whole batch of 96 metric tons was immense. Now, what did that mean? The Kenyan guys said, no, of course, the agreement was your grain should be less than 8 parts per billion, and yours goes even beyond 30. So that is more around about 4 times higher than what they expected. So all the maize was basically contaminated with high levels of aflatoxins. And you know what that meant? It meant that all the 96 metric tons of maize would no longer go to the international market to capture that good price. And what they did, the Ugandan guys were like, wow, so we cannot afford to lose the money. We cannot afford to lose the produce. And he told us verbatim, by the way, it's just 2 days ago that he told us that they decided that, yeah, they agreed they were not meeting the standard for export. And 2, they also acknowledged the fact that some of the maize that they had collected was actually not properly stored or managed by the different food system actors. And so they decided that since they had lost the external market, which was very, very good market, they decided to get all the 96 metric tons and they supplied them to the Ugandan market, meaning that the maize went back to our market. All of us went and bought that maize and we consumed the portion from that. And then most of this maize perhaps went to the schools because also the term was beginning. So schools came and procured this and they took it to school. And so our children are already having food that is highly contaminated in their schools, and they're going to feed on it for the next 3 months of the term. That is what it means. Now, what is the worry? Why are we even still concerned about aflatoxins? One of the issues that we need to even worry more about is that science tells us that aflatoxins, when consumed in large quantities, and in large quantities, you can imagine that the acceptable for Uganda is 10 parts per billion, and our samples go beyond 30. So what that means is that we consume a lot of aflatoxins. Now, what is the problem with aflatoxins in our bodies? Aflatoxins are confirmed carcinogens. Carcinogens means something that can actually cause cancer when you have chronic exposure to it. So, meaning that the more you eat food that is contaminated with aflatoxins, you stand a risk of actually having cancer. So, that's why we are saying that aflatoxins are carcinogenic in nature, meaning that they can actually propel the risk of people having cancer. So there are particular cancers that over the years we have been studying as scientists. We've been looking at particularly liver cancer, which has been known for quite some time now that it is a sure deal. The more people have access to contaminated maize, there is a risk of people getting liver cancer. Now, the Cancer Institute has done more studies around the aflatoxin exposure. And while we thought the earlier studies documented liver cancer, we realized that in Uganda alone, every single year, we register 3,700 cases of liver cancer. 3,700 cases of liver cancer. Those are the new cases that we grab every year, either at the Cancer Institute, at the health center falls, at the hospitals. And this is specifically to the cancers that are associated with aflatoxin-induced cancers. Now, the current studies, which are yet to be published in I think in a few months, if not a few days, we have learned that actually chronic exposure to aflatoxins is not only associated with liver cancer. Actually, the new studies have shown that other immune suppression cancers are also showing the odds of those cancers occurring in human beings are also higher, about 3 times higher. So while we have been thinking about liver cancer, other immune suppression cancer types have also shown a significant association with aflatoxins. So, for instance, the Cancer Institute and the Cancer Association have been studying samples of different cancers. And one of the most worrying things was that even cervical cancer had a 3 times fold risk in individuals that actually were consuming high levels of aflatoxins. So again, there is that association that is being documented with different cancers, including cervical cancer, and of course other cancers that probably shall present to you when that paper is out. So you see that it is not just an issue that we need to joke with. First of all, the more we consume the aflatoxins, the more our immunity is deprived. So the immune system actually lowers. So when it lowers, it means that the cancers that are called the immune suppression kind of cancers, they will come in because your immunity is already compromised by the aflatoxins. So that is where the science is. So we find that in Uganda, the government of Uganda, or Uganda as a whole, we can only afford as a country to manage 17 to 20% of the total cases of cancer. 17 to 20, meaning that the 80% of the cases will go untreated or they will die because we don't have sufficient capacity to handle those caseloads. You can imagine that Uganda can only afford to manage about 4,000 cases of cancer per year. So the Cancer Institutes can only manage 17 to 20% of the cancers that are actually taken there. The rest have to be sent abroad. If they are not sent abroad, they just have to die. So that is why we need to do a lot of work to make sure that we improve the situation of any risks that actually bring about the risk of cancer. So that's why we're talking about these things. Now, let us leave a little bit the cancer perspective. We can also have, or we have also registered people, especially those who have acute exposure, meaning that it is quick, like you've been having aflatoxins just for a few days. Science shows us that acute exposure, or the short-term exposure to aflatoxins, could actually lead to liver failure. So away from liver cancer, now they're talking about liver failure. That is acute. So every time you have access to contaminated foods, you have a risk of actually having a liver failure. Now you just imagine every time we wake up, we hear someone has had multi-organ failure. The moment you have liver failure, it is going to propel other organs also to fail. So at the end of the day, you have multi-organ failure, and we do not know actually where it is coming from. Actually, most of the cases are actually associated with aflatoxins. So that is how bad it is. And then for the case of the men, science also has shown us that continuous exposure to aflatoxins would actually affect production and the quality and the mobility of male sperms. Meaning, meaning that the more you have chronic exposure to aflatoxins, the more you stand a risk. If you're a male or if you're a man, there is a risk of affecting sperm production and the quality of the sperms that men produce, but also the morbidity, or rather mobility of the sperms. So at the end of the day, that can affect reproduction in men. And actually, further research even shows that it can affect even the testes. And so the testicles as well can be affected. So you find that it's a whole chain of things, and that can spoil people's families, that can lead to impotence, that can lead to, less functionality of men. And of course, the story goes on and on, but this is how risky the subject matter we are talking about is. And so we need to take keen attention on how we manage the issue of aflatoxins. But let us look at the children. Now, when you have children under the age of 5 and they continuously have access to aflatoxin contaminated food, science has shown us that there is a risk of stunting. Stunting is the inability of the child's brain to grow and function the way it should. So, meaning that the more we eat maize, the more we eat wheat, the more we eat rice, the more we eat groundnuts, the more we eat sorghum or millet or any of the grains that are actually contaminated with aflatoxins, and this is the food that we are continually giving our children, there is a risk that this could lead to stunted growth. And remember, in Uganda already, 26% of children under the age of 5 are already stunted. So, meaning that the more we give children food that is highly contaminated with aflatoxins, the more we predispose them to the risk of having stunted growth. And stunted growth comes with a lot of challenges. One of the challenges is that immunity is always lower, and so they can always fall sick. And when they fall sick, they don't heal easily or faster. Or if they don't heal faster, it means that the parent is continually injecting money to go and treat this child. And the more you injecting money to go to the hospital to treat this child, the more you are less productive because you don't have more time to go to work because you'll keep having this baby in the hospital. And actually, many of the children, when they grow, they become less productive because their brains are not fully developed to their full potentials. And so those children cannot think, cannot reason, cannot be innovative, cannot be active, they cannot be productive, in other words. So at the end of the day, you have a community of people who don't think, who don't reason, who don't innovate, and then we remain in that kind of thing. And so we remain backward, people remain poor, and then the poverty keeps on and on and on and on again. And so this is how the things have to be connected with each other so that we can be able to think about the ways of reducing aflatoxins in our food chain to avoid these things. Now, it's not only stunted growth in children, it can actually also result into other forms of undernutrition. For instance, underweight, where you find, for instance, a child of 8 years having weight of a baby of around about 4 years. I have witnessed in my practice a child who was 6 years, but the child had less than 10 kilograms. So you see, underweight can come in because, first of all, the immunity is compromised. Number two, the child is not taking in sufficient amounts of food. Number three, the child is not able to utilize the nutrients that actually they are taking. The problem with aflatoxins is that the moment aflatoxins are available in a diet or in a meal, it will compromise the ability of the body to have access and utilize the other nutrients in that same meal. So aflatoxins actually they become like an inhibitor to the utilization and absorption of the nutrients. And that's why it is linked to stunted growth. That's why it is linked to underweight. That's why it is linked to micronutrient deficiencies. That's why it is linked to all these other forms of malnutrition. So that is how big the issue we are talking about. And so when you go and dive into this report, you will actually be able to find those different parameters that I'm just talking about. And then maybe one would think that, okay, what about the animals that we have? Remember that the animals, let us say chicken, rabbits, fish, uh, piggery, all those animals are being fed on feed, and the feed has been made from grain. So, for instance, if you look at most of our pigs and our poultry and our birds and whatever, and our fish, they're now being fed on bran, which is a maize product, or which is from cereal or whatever it is. And so what is happening is that if the cereal is contaminated and then you make animal feed from that cereal, the animals are going to partake of the aflatoxins. Now, what is the problem with animals taking in aflatoxins? The problem is animals can actually die. Farmers have lost huge sums of animals because of aflatoxin contamination. The recent story, I think, was from Naro, where they fed fish in the ponds and they fed it with some pellets. But the pellets, of course, were made from grain, and all the fish died. They're talking about millions of fingerlings dying because of aflatoxin in feed, aflatoxin contaminated feed. Recently, there is another case of a farmer who lost 500 birds at once. So they brought a consignment of feed, bran, and they gave to the birds, and all of them perished on consumption. 500 birds. You know what that means? If these are layers, how much is the farmer actually losing because of the feed that was actually contaminated? So we need to reason out these things in a manner that actually makes sense to the farmers as well. So when we give them feed that is contaminated and all their birds die, that is their livelihood. That is what they have, and all the birds perish. Recently, Professor Kaya was sharing with us on this call. His father is retired, and so they decided to give him birds to keep home, and then he keep looking after his birds. And then he just bought a consignment of feed, and when he gave the feed, all the birds, 180 birds, died. So you see that the farmer can lose all he has because of feed that has aflatoxins. Now, what is the problem also is that every time the animals have access to aflatoxins, aflatoxin kind of reduce the organoleptic properties of food, and so the animals they don't feel the taste of the food, and so they eat less. And so when they eat less, usually they are not having enough food that they are eating, and so they keep on losing weight. They become less productive, and many of them actually they die. So that is all a challenge that comes along with aflatoxins. So when you're talking about aflatoxins, it shouldn't be something that we politicize, something that we look at with eyes of, I don't know. We need to look at it as a country security threat. We need to look at it as an issue of a threat to food security, a threat to nutrition security, a threat to trade. So when you look at those perspectives, maybe let me also quickly tell you that aflatoxins will not only affect the health, as I've shown you, but also it affects the economy. If you look at what I've just told you, where farmers lose animals, where farmers are not able to have animals that are productive. A cow that is supposed to give this farmer maybe 30 liters a day, it starts giving you 5 liters, and so you make a loss. But also, when it comes to the export rejections, just like I've given you a case of the 96 metric tons, which would fetch us a lot of money from the external market, now it was sold cheaply. And at the end of the day, we lost a lot of money that we would actually earn. Now, statistics in this report also was showing us that when you look at the years 20, I think 20, between 2019 2022, we started seeing a decline in the money that we're actually getting from these crops, like the cereals, because every time we send them to the market, they are rejected because of the aflatoxins. While we used to earn around about 100 million US dollars between 2012 and 2017, we see that between now up to 2022, we had dropped from 101 million to 96, a loss of 5 million US dollars in the rejections. Just imagine the other day, Kenya rejected our maize at the border. Just imagine Sudan rejected 62 trucks, Ugandan trucks, in March, I think 2020, it was around 2023. I mean, it's a whole mess. And this is the money that we are losing. Every time a country sends away your consignment, just look at Sudan rejecting 62 trucks. If each truck, I don't know what is the tonnage, but each of those trucks could be more than 5 tons, I don't know. But just imagine 62 trucks, and all of them are rejected because the maize is highly contaminated with aflatoxins. What does that mean? That the farmers, the traders, the transporters, etc., they have wasted time, they have wasted their energy, they have wasted the money, they have wasted everything, and they are not able to have that market. What is still shocking is the fact that this food comes back to the Ugandan market and we consume it by ourselves because of the weaker policies that I will speak about a little bit later. So these are some of the challenges. But of course, because we are spending a lot of money, we are losing a lot of foreign exchange. We are losing. So you find that even the country itself is losing in terms of tax. FRA may not get money from these transactions. And so we see a reduction in tax collection.
Bernard, it seems that we're having some technical glitch, but like Bernard was sharing, when you look at the different economic challenges, we lose taxes because whether we are trading locally or exporting, we end up getting food condemned, not fit for human consumption. And when we lose those taxes or revenue, then the food, the revenue that we lose, or the financial resources we lose them even before farm. Then when it comes to the farm, as in input, because we spent money buying the inputs, we come onto the farm, we spend money on arranging the farm, preparing the farm, paying for the human resource that works on the farm, harvesting, transportation, storage, processing, marketing, packaging, energy. So all those resources are lost once the food is contaminated, once the food doesn't follow the code of practice, as regards to hygiene, sanitation, good agricultural practices, good post-harvest approaches, good handling, transportation, good manufacturing or processing practices, not using food grade infrastructure. You see, just imagine our foods are contaminated by aflatoxin. Then the infrastructure within which it is processed to add value to them is also not food grade, where you find that all those the materials that are used, they are affecting the food. Once it is condemned, we lose those resources, the revenue and the taxation. So Bernard, you can pick it up. I was just a little breaking down the financial losses and the way we are losing tax when food is condemned not to be fit for human consumption, not to be fit as feed for livestock consumption.
Yeah.
So we lose a lot of revenue in all sides. So whether it
Yes.
is food for human, whether it is feed for livestock, and livestock takes in all food producing animals, even fish fall under there, everything. So it is very, very key. And then, like I said, we before farm, we lose the inputs, that the money that we put in buying the inputs on farm and post harvest, and even after harvest, when it comes after consumption, when it is contaminated, still we lose resources when consumers will fall sick, money that would have gone to production so that you pay taxes, you are productive and increasing productivity, but you are bedridden. So Bernard, please go ahead. I was chipping in as we waited for you. Bernard, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Of course, science in action. The network keeps on breaking, but I think I was done a little bit of breaking down what really is in the report. That's a lot of policies. Uganda is also a member to so many committees on aflatoxins and all this. So there's a lot of work that has been happening in the background. But the problem is that irrespective of the efforts are still very, very minimal. For instance, we know that every sub-county is supposed to be having, for instance, agriculture extension workers. But as we speak, the law or the policy around extension is that every one extension worker is supposed to reach out to 500 farmers. But as it stands now in Uganda, one extension officer is reaching out to 1,800. So you see that one person cannot be able to reach 1,800 people. That is practically impossible because you're training this farmer how to plant the food, how to harvest it, how to do what, and is one person. So while one person is supposed to be handling 500 farmers, now we see a dilemma where one extension worker is actually dealing with 1,800 people, closer to 2,000 people alone. So that person cannot be effective in any way. So it means that there is a gap there in the extension service delivery. We need to actually strengthen the agriculture extension services to make sure that people are reached out to, farmers are being trained, and something of the sort. So, secondly, you see that we have a lot of laws, we have standards, we have policies, we have all these things. But how does our maize even go up to Kenya and then it is rejected from there and then it bounces back? Okay, when the law is when the food is found with high levels of aflatoxins beyond the threshold of 10 parts per billion, it is supposed to be destroyed. It is supposed to be banned. Now, how many cases have we seen in Uganda of banning food? What it does, people just return it back and supply it to our schools, supply it to our supermarkets, supply it to whatever. So it means that there's a policy or a legal or a framework that is not working in there. So we just want to guide that, okay, we are recommending that there should be deliberate efforts to execute, to implement, to enforce the existing laws, policies, regulations, and standards around that area of aflatoxins. Otherwise, we're going to collapse the economy, we're going to kill our people, we're going to die. And when we die in such a poor country, what happens is that we have nothing much we can do. So just imagine we have all those bureaus and whatever. So, but the execution the implementation is not really happening. But also, sometimes the implementation would be happening, especially when it comes to the departments and agencies or MDAs. But the problem is, these ministries, departments, and agencies are not allocated money to do this work. So you find that the money given to Ministry of Trade, given to UNPS, is too small that actually they cannot do so much. When you look at the guys who are supposed to be checking these things, are they facilitated to do it anyway? So the allocation, the budget allocation to these things must be priority. If we don't prioritize the food safety aspect of this thing, we are going to lament and we're not going to do so much. The other aspect is science and technology and innovations. A lot of innovations have come on board to actually support us in mitigating and preventing and controlling aflatoxins. For instance, there is a biosolution called Aflasafe. Aflasafe is a biosolution that can actually prevent the occurrence of aflatoxins right away from the garden. And the Ministry of Agriculture, of course through NARO, have been working out this solution with support from IITA. It has been pre-tested in Uganda, and actually Uganda was one of the countries where the pre-testing was done in around about 11 districts, and the thing was perfect. It worked well. IITA has even supported government to construct a unit where they're going to produce this thing. And Naro is currently, I think, producing on a small scale. But how do we scale up this technology to make sure that the farmers have access to AflaSafe or solutions? We have also seen that innovations to do the testing have been put in place. I have seen people coming up with mobile kits for testing maize, for testing cereals on aflatoxins. But the problem has been the cost of testing is extremely high. In Uganda, we have more than 3 laboratories. We have one at UNBS, we have one at Makerere, we have one at Igal, we have one at Naro, which can test these things. But the cost of testing is too high that a farmer cannot afford to test their product for aflatoxins. So how do we subsidize such things? But also, how do we have laboratories of that nature down to the district? Someone cannot come from Kasese, but they are coming to test their product here in Kampala. No way. Why can't we have these laboratories right away at local government level so that people can have access to these services? So we still have a gap there, and we can address it by having these laboratories closer to the people, but also subsidizing the cost of testing for these products. Otherwise, we shall keep inventing things and we keep them in the laboratory and they're not going anywhere and people are not accessing them. People don't have sufficient knowledge about them. People cannot afford, and we end up wasting time modifying these things in our programming. So, what about the awareness? People are not even aware of these things. But how many people are talking about them? How many guys have been recruited to go and support communities to do this? I always make a joke that nutritionists would do this thing better and food scientists. But government is employing 20 nutritionists in the whole country. So how can we reach out to the people? How can we even sensitize the masses with this kind of information? So there's a lot that we need to do to improve the status quo. Let us create awareness, let us build the capacity of people, let us have the technologies extended to the people, and we scale them up so that they can be able to be accessed by our people. Let us also invest, deliberate investment in fighting against aflatoxins, but also other food safety related aspects. Allocate a budget specific for food safety, and we improve the safety of the food we are eating, because food is a national security issue. Food is a national security matter that we need to deal with. If we don't have food security, if we don't have nutrition security, we are going to have a population that cannot produce anything, that cannot reason, that cannot give you a tax, that cannot do any kind of innovation. So why don't we resources right there and we make sure that we work around the clock to support our people come up with all these things? Let us recruit more extension workers, scientists to go out there and do this work. Let us make sure we mentor, train, build capacity of traders, of farmers, of extension workers, of everybody in the food value chain so that we provide these services for people. Let us give more money to NARO. Let us give more money to UNBS to give us these things and they implement them. And I think with all of that summed together, we can be able to change and transform the food system of our nations. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is just a glimpse of that report. Kindly You can visit the Food Safety Coalition website. The report is there. You can visit the consent website. The report is there. But also on their social media pages, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find this report. Very interesting report, and you can be able to actually read it and understand what is going on in our country. So with that, I want to thank you, Mr. Chimera. I know our time is running; it has run out. Apologies for taking quite long, but I think it was healthy for us to appreciate what this report really brings out, and also to have an idea of how the food safety situation is being compromised in our country. As we welcome colleagues in Uganda, join us tomorrow for the run. We have a World Food Safety Run starting at the city square at 7 in the morning, so that we can proclaim the gospel of food safety. Thank you so much, and yeah, have a lovely Eid.
Thank you very much, Bernard. You're always amazing, bringing in all the spheres and the pillars that can sustain the quality of consumer life. You know, that shared, showing that issues of food safety do not only need individuals, it is everybody's business. But we have got cardinal responsible institutions, ministries, departments, and agencies who have to lay the foundation so that other players, once the duty bearers with regards as in government, ministries, departments, and agencies, play their role in policy, legal and regulatory frameworks, then the food businesses play their role in complying with standards, and when the legal, the regulatory agencies are enforcing, to check out compliance, ensuring quality, empowering for a culture of quality where we have leadership following codes of practice, codes of hygiene. Then it comes to us, the consumers, to have responsibility. So to realize all these, colleagues, we need to analyze the environment we are working in, whom we are working with. We need to corroborate. As we corroborate, like we are doing at this World Food Safety Day celebrations, brought in different players, Minister of Agriculture and other ministries, departments and agencies coming together, bringing in businesses, bringing in civil society organizations, consumer organizations to advance food safety, to raise awareness. We need to collaborate. We need now to continuously sustain the partnerships. Partnerships do deliver. Having said that, we need to do all this in partnerships to sustain, unpack policies, roll them down, so that we get out of the talk shows and we go into action. The call to action that we have made, we need to continuously advocate to make sure there is great investment in quality infrastructure, capacity building, research, and continuous advocacy. As I mentioned earlier, there are many celebrations. There have been Earth Days, the Earth, that one planet that needs to be healthy to sustain our health, that needs to be healthy to sustain our health. There's been the World Environment Day, like I said, let's beat the plastic pollution. There is the Anti-Counterfeit Day today. We need to fight anti-counterfeit in food production. Anti-counterfeit affects food safety. We talked about food fraud. All these affects our social aspects, but with science in action, using indigenous knowledge, using traditional science, using modern science, we can improve our sustainability, social aspects, use technology, improve the environment, improve our economic welfare, put policies in place, implore the legal frameworks, and we need to be ethical. With food safety, we need to be ethical. Science needs to be ethical to deliver the solutions to food safety challenges. So as we conclude our today's session, we trust and we think that when we join together with food safety and as we beat the plastic pollution, we can reduce the waste, the contaminations that are there in soils, in waters, in the entire food system. We need to make sure there is enforcement. We need to invest in addressing the contamination approaches, addressing alternatives that will deliver and do not affect, like chemicals do affect, the highly hazardous chemicals affect. The unscrupulous use the chemicals to dry the maize, to dry the cereals. That is unscrupulous and which is unethical. So we need to invest in quality culture. We need to invest in quality infrastructure, comply with standards that are national, regional, continental, or global, so that we have one test, we recognize each other's standards, we have one standard, one test, and reach out to provide the consumers with safe, healthy, quality goods and services. We need to continuously collaborate for awareness, sensitizing the policymakers through advocacy, sensitizing the different players, the duty bearers, by speaking up and out on issues affecting us. We need to collaborate by telling businesses what you are giving us is not good, that what you're doing is unethical. It is us, the consumers, with the money. We need to speak out. We need to sensitize ourselves. We need to build our own capacity as consumers. When we keep quiet, our kinsfolk, our children in school, our other relatives, whether in urban or rural area, get affected. But one of the biggest emphasis is where we consumers, we need to advocate and sustain the advocacy, is where the type, the quality of food our children are eating. Once they get affected, our heritages are affected too. We will be spending more productive time treating ourselves and treating our children. So it is very key that we address the food safety time bomb that we are faced with today by investing in quality infrastructure, investing in enforcement, investing in awareness, investing in research. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very important that we continuously build on those to address our heritage, to address our One Health, in that the environment is healthy, as in soils, the animals that provide us food are healthy, the crops that eat from that environment, feed on that environment, are healthy, then we nourish ourselves as the human beings, then we nourish the environment itself, the planet on which we are using a One Health approach and advocating for healthy communities we live in. So ladies and gentlemen, happy Eid, and thank you very much to Humanist TV for giving us the time, giving us the extra time to send the message across. And I would like to thank you, Bennett, for always coming in to expound and unpack how to do better business and protect the consumer, and also advancing the consumer agenda. So ladies and gentlemen, it was a great pleasure. Fellow consumers, let's up our game and advocate, be there, speak up, and we change the environment that is affecting us, so that we have got a healthy environment in which we live. We need to be critical. We need to take action. We need to have social concern. And in solidarity as consumers, we can have sustainable businesses, giving us value for money and safeguarding us. So I wish you a happy Eid and look forward to being with you next Friday so that we continuously engage. Thank you very much, our producer, Dennis Bongole, and all your colleagues and the management of Humanist TV Africa. Superb weekend.